might not know it, but your brain acts differently when you play racing games. Keep watching to find out how. Sometimes when you play a game, you enter a different frame of mind. You might spend hours obsessively repeating the same track to beat someone you met once in real life. Or you might erroneously think that you've actually spent hours and days learning every twist and turn of the Nürburgring in real life, even though you can't drive and you've never been to Germany. And the thing is, you're not alone. These are things our brain is predisposed to doing, and that's exactly what we'll explore in this video. As ever, all the links to the relevant studies are in the description. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to Logitech G and ring the notification bell for more videos about everything to do with games. Here are 5 ways your brain behaves differently when you play racing games. Let's dispense with the starting line analogies and get straight to the interesting stuff. Games, and especially racing games, tell us a lot about how and why we're competitive. A great explanation of this is found on Jamie Madigan's Psychology of Gaming site. In the article, Jamie talks about the way that leaderboards work to encourage competition and comparison. He uses trials evolution in his example, but the principles still apply to any game that has leaderboards. And, more importantly, leaderboards that compare you to your friends. Something a lot of racing games do. Because, as Madigan points out, we're far more likely to want to compete against people we know. This is called social comparison theory, and it was first proposed by social psychologist Leon Festinger back in 1954. As humans, we just love to hear information about ourselves and our performance.
The fans really seem to enjoy that. You made it look easy.
And if we can't get that direct feedback, we look for the next best thing by comparing ourselves to the people we know. Research has shown that we like to be compared to smaller groups of people, and the effect is more potent when those people are familiar to us, because it's suddenly more meaningful. I'd much rather beat Matt's race time in a game, for example, which wouldn't be hard, than I would a total stranger. And this is partly the reason it's so nice seeing friends' gamer tags appear in the likes of Forza Horizon, even if it's not them actually playing. Take that, pretend human. It still counts. When people talk about being happy to go with the flow, they tend to mean they're just relaxed enough to follow the crowd, and they haven't organised their day in a spreadsheet. But when it comes to game design, and I'll audibly cap it up now, flow is a little more purposeful. It's the official name for that feeling of losing hours when you play your favourite games. A psychologist called Mihai Csikszentmihalyi in the 1970s did a series of experiments to examine the concept of flow and its balance of skill and difficulty. It turns out that if these are disproportionate, people will get grumpy, frustrated, and just plain bored. But if they're roughly the same, then we'll enter what's known as a state of flow. It's basically a psychological sweet spot that we hit when we're playing something that's simultaneously challenging but also achievable. Csikszentmihalyi worked out a series of characteristics that can be found in tasks that engage flow. These, it won't surprise you, fit perfectly within the best driving games. First off, tasks should have concrete goals with manageable rules. Winning or beating a lap time is crystal clear. Secondly, the task should be within a person's capabilities. This is especially interesting given that driving games often offer up a choice of control methods, meaning that if you were sitting with a wheel and paddles, you could opt for more granular controls. But you could alternatively arm yourself with a pad and be just as happy to play. Jamie Madigan of the aforementioned Psychology of Games states that the assists available in games like Forza mean that as long as a game can let you set your own capabilities, flow will follow. Flow also works best when we have a clear idea of feedback and just how well we've managed to meet our goals. Where better then can we see our successes, or indeed failures, than on a grid of lap times measured down to the millisecond. Driving games fuel our desire for competition and make it very clear if we've won or lost. Hence, engaging perfect flow goals.
Once again, it's the Silver Arrows who take top spot. A well-earned victory for Mercedes.
So, racing games can deliver a perfect sense of flow and make time dangerously disappear. But that's not all they do to our brains. Games as a whole empower us. They give us control, agency, power, and autonomy in an understandable world. It's intoxicating. But we don't need a BFG to feel empowered. Driving games can do it too. Regardless of whether players can actually drive or not, the feelings elicited by pixelated racing are all down to a series of exceptionally smart design decisions. In an article on Gamasutra called A Rational Approach to Racing Game Design, Luke McMillan breaks down, pun intended, the elements that truly make players feel like they're taking over the world when they put their pedal to the metal. These are basically the lap-based versions of our video of design tricks that you never knew devs were pulling. These obviously depend on the type of experience though. More realistic racers will make it more challenging for the player, while arcade-style titles will constantly sacrifice reality for empowerment. Devs understand that you don't want to spend your entire time with your foot on the brake, so they design with that in mind. Road markings are laid out for the illusion of speed, and in arcade experiences, corners should always be on camber. McMillan mentions Daytona USA, which used on-camber turns to allow for otherwise impossible entries and exit speeds. These were specifically designed for the dopamine hit they would provide non-drivers who actually have to do very little to feel like they're acing a lap.
A new winner!
Our next entry relates not only to driving games, but the sense of being in a different world that comes from playing with a peripheral. In this case, a racing wheel like the G923. Here we return again to Jamie Madigan's site and something he calls presence. Essentially, the heightened sense of being in the game rather than just playing it. When this happens, we tend to ignore the technology that separates us from the game world, meaning that we're more likely to enjoy it on an intuitive, immediate level. This sense of presence is heightened by using something that behaves like a thing in the game, such as a steering wheel. Paul Skalski and his colleagues at Cleveland State University tested this idea, focusing on how naturally a controller felt to play a game and what effect that had on a player's presence. What they found was that the closer the method of control resembled the realistic feel of navigating a game, the greater the level of immersion and presence a player would experience. A steering wheel, for example, represented what the team called realistic, tangible, natural mapping. In other words, a real object that behaves in the same way as its in-game counterpart. The study showed that when this type of controller was used, players were more likely to report feelings of being in the game. It's perhaps an obvious point to say that using a wheel will make you feel like you're actually racing, but it's nice to have the science to back it up.
Hey boss, this is Jeff. Just wanted to say thanks for trusting me as your race engineer. I won't let you down.
And finally, the most important question of all, Can driving games make you a better cook? Well, yes, sort of.
Hello, Chef. Good luck today.
In 2013, neuroscientist Adam Gasley of the University of California carried out a trial using a specially designed driving game called NeuroRacer. The goal was to show that games could be designed to address specific cognitive deficits, in this case, multitasking in older people. To test this, his team made a three-dimensional racing game in which players steer a car along a winding hilly road while looking out for specific signs that they had to shoot down. The game that you're seeing here isn't the same NeuroRacer because it's not commercially available, but another educational game with the same name that also tests our ability to multitask, albeit in a different way. 46 participants aged 60 to 85 were put through a 4-week training period with the game. The study revealed that after training, subjects had improved so much that they achieved higher scores than 20-year-old counterparts who'd had no training whatsoever. And these skills tended to remain for up to 6 months, even without practice. What's more, the skills learned weren't limited to driving games. Even cognitive abilities not specifically targeted by the game improved and remained improved. As well as getting better at NeuroRacer, participants had improved memories and attention spans, useful for tasks as varied as reading newspapers and, you guessed it, cooking food. And there you go. 5 ways your brain behaves differently when you play racing games. Don't forget to hit the links in the description if you want to learn more. And if you want your own best-in-class force feedback wheel so you can lose yourself while exploring the Scottish Highlands at 100 miles an hour, why not check out the Logitech G923? There's a link down there for that too. As ever, give this video a like if you learned anything, and thanks for watching.